Hello, and welcome to the Flix Forum podcast, where each episode we go back and we look at a Netflix original film in the order of release. This episode, we have Netflix 149th film from 2019. It's the Indian Hindi language drama Music Teacher. It's directed by Sarthak Dasgupta, and it stars Manav Kaul, Divya, Dutta, and Neena, Gupta. I am Jesse, and I'm here with MJ. How are you?
I am very, very well. Very much looking forward to discussing this film with you, and I'm glad I'm back for another week. I think since I came back, I've only missed one, haven't I? So I've made a pretty good track record of it.
And that was another Indian film that you missed as well. So
and that wasn't deliberate. That wasn't deliberate.
I feel like from number 100, and we're nearly at 150, I feel like we have had a fair chunk of international films, which is good because as daunting as sometimes it is, I do thoroughly enjoy seeing films that I probably would never go out of my way to see. This is like forces me to do it.
And look, that's the model, right? At the end of the day, when we started this podcast 150 odd episodes ago, and our goal was to catch up with Netflix on their original films, and as we've seen in the last couple of years, I mean, they're punching out original films, sometimes 2 or 3 a week, and when you're doing that, then it just gives you this license to get films from all over the world. When you've got an international product, then it makes a lot of sense. So I think we're just going to continue to be seeing this going forward. What's this, 2019? So I haven't really checked what's happened in the last 2 years, but
we're still a long way to go. We're never going to catch.
We ain't catching that.
That's okay. It still gives us something to talk about. We start our show with our fast flick, so we do a quick little summary of the film. So what's your fast flicks for Music Teacher?
It is a middle-aged man revisits his past when the one that got away returns to town.
Oh, I like that. I was so blank on any originality for this that I've never done this before, but I'm going to use someone else's summary.
Oh no!
So I'm giving some credit. This is for Chinky Sinha. So if you're listening, Chinky, this is their summary of this film. I'm trying not to laugh. Okay, there is a man who sits on a bench overlooking a valley. He sometimes lights a cigarette and then throws it away, allows himself to indulge in memories of a distant past where there used to be a girl with curly hair who wanted to stay back for the sake of beautiful evenings in a hilly town with her music teacher. But he had said to her she must go out and into the world to sing. They had met at a waterfall. Done. Thank you very much, Chinky. That was great.
I don't mind it. So where did you find that review?
I can't remember because I think I was pretty intoxicated. But I but I saw it and I thought, well, that's it sounds poetic. Just reading that out, I was like, it just makes this film sound like it's a masterpiece. So thank you very much for giving me.
For what it's worth, I don't hate it, but I don't know if it necessarily. If someone's like, "Hey, what's Music Teacher about?" and you said that, I'd be like, no, seriously, what's Music Teacher about? But I enjoyed that we've gone down different paths for this.
Yeah, sorry, I just couldn't not share that. So this is the part where we talk about how this film got onto Netflix or how it was put together. So what could you find about this one?
Well, I ended up stumbling across something that gave me a little bit of information because I was initially stuck because Wikipedia gave me nothing and IMDb gave me very little as well. So what I did discover is that the story itself basically comes from a poem by Joy Goswami's Malatibalala Balika Biriyale. I'm so sorry for that pronunciation.
I'm glad that you're first because I was going to struggle my way through that as well. So thank you.
When I was reading this to myself, I was like, oh yeah, I can read that. And I read it and it was fine. And as soon as you press record, then I sort of go to water. Anyway, I apologize. The poem itself is about a young girl who grows up to become a needlework tutor. And the song's about her longing for, oh God, there's another name here. Benim Mabab, who is a well-read man who she met when she was in her sweet 16 beside the bridge. And this woman basically is waiting for this man forever. So that's the crux of this poem. And this song that she sings, it really resonated with the director, Sarthak Dasgupta. So he had this idea for a story based on this song or poem, and he wanted to tell the story of the woman seeing the man again, but he wanted to be able to tell the story Ooh, hang on. I'm going to do a spoiler alert, actually, just before I continue that sentence.
Good idea. Yeah.
We are going to spoil the movie Music Teacher. So if you haven't watched it and you do want to watch it before we spoil it, watch it and then come back to us. Otherwise, keep listening and you'll cop some spoilers. But he wanted to make this movie of the woman meeting the man again, but he wanted the woman to actually basically say no to this man after she'd been waiting all this time, and he sort of wants her back and she says no. So he kept calling up directors and producers and eventually decided if he wanted this film to get made, he'd have to do it himself. So after years of trying, the producers eventually agreed to take on this project. The story itself went through 22 drafts. At first, he wanted Nawazuddin Siddiqui and Frida Pinto as the two main characters in the film. But by the time he actually found producers, Siddiqui had actually become quite a big star in India, and they couldn't actually afford to have him in the project. Frida Pinto feels like she probably would have already been a big star and probably too expensive for them. But anyway, man can dream. So after 17 years of waiting, they finally shoot this film in 18 days, which I kind of like. And ironically, that prolonged act of waiting is kind of the crux of the film as well. So this film was produced by Udall Films, which is a production company in India that more or less specializes in independent cinema. And they were the ones that produced this film. And they've formed a little bit of a relationship with Netflix because in 2018, 2019, that's when we heard that Brij Mahan Amar Rai, which is a movie that we've done on this podcast, was acquired by Netflix. And at that point, they spoke about this being the first collaboration between the two parties. And they highlighted their commitment towards forging solid relationships with Indian content creators. And then Music Teacher I'm not sure if it was part of that same deal or whether it had just the fact that they'd already started that relationship. And these Netflix originals, currently part of other originals that they're doing with Udall Films. So we might have already seen other ones that I wasn't on the podcast for, actually, Jesse, with Udall. But either way, if not, we'll probably get some more. So that's kind of the story of this film.
Excellently put. That's the same article that I found as well, which obviously talked about all those things that you've mentioned. Apparently, it's set in 1985. I
enjoyed finding that out as well.
Yeah. So I thought it was interesting. And the only other context that I can add is, I guess, that the actor who plays the main character in this one, Manav Kaul, he mentioned that playing this character he felt made him become a better person. And his highlight of filming this movie was when the director, and we've already said a spoiler alert, but at the end, there's this scene with the two characters actually getting together. And he said that the director would run out of the room with tears in his eyes in that final scene. And so obviously that's left a lasting impression on him as for playing this character and being a part of this production as well. Yeah,
I like that.
Yeah, it's nice. So this hit Netflix on the 12th of April, 2019. Filmed around some beautiful scenery in the Himachal Pradesh area of India. What's some consensus that we've got for this one? What are the people saying about this movie?
Well, the overarching theme that I've found from looking at the consensus is that there's just not that many people who have rated it. So not necessarily have seen it, but it sort of does coincide with the fact that not many people have seen it. It's a 6.3 out of 10 on IMDb, which is a great score. But it's only got 606 ratings. And on Letterboxd, it's a 3.2 out of 5, which is basically exactly the same. But it's got 86 ratings. And I think there's probably an element of IMDb and Letterboxd being very westernized platforms. Potentially, a lot of people in India have seen these films and aren't the type to jump on those platforms and rate it. And probably similarly with Rotten Tomatoes, Jesse.
Yeah, I think very good point that you make, because Rotten Tomatoes, only 3 critics have seen it. 1 was positive, 2 are negative, so no overall picture there. The audience, under 50 reviews, so again on the smaller side, but it sits at 67% from the audience on Rotten Tomatoes. So yeah, like you mentioned, it's very hard to get an overall picture when there are so few people that have gone out of their way to express their feelings on this one, I guess. And that will lead us into you giving us your early thoughts on your expressions of this film.
Yeah, so for me, it was a real slow burn. I eventually kind of became a bit more interested in Benny's character journey. I still found him a very difficult character to like. So much angst. He was kind of so deep into his own self-pity, and in a slow film that's basically centered around one man, it was at times a pretty hard sell. So with that said, I like the idea of moving on and letting go, and even if that looks a little bit different than what you expected. So the themes were kind of nice, but it was slow. Before I throw to you though, you said something just before we started recording that I actually think is going to be really relevant to a recording about how you have just been hanging out to talk about this film for about a week. So I cannot wait to find out.
And I'm going to put this really shortly and really sharply. And I agree. I agree with you. It was a massive slog, and I really disliked this. This is a protagonist that I did not care about one little bit, and a completely ridiculous ending. And that sums up how I feel. Like, I can't wait to get into this.
The ending. I'm not sure if you're talking about the actual, like the ending of the relationship, or the actual physical ending of the Well, the ending, that was his story. That's what he wanted to tell. It took him 17 years to tell this story.
Oh my Lord, what a conclusion to a film. Anyway, we'll get to that a little bit later on. We'll talk about some characters. So you've already mentioned that this is Benny's story. So what are your thoughts on Benny?
Yeah, I kind of touched on it already, and you mentioned it too. I found him hard work. It's not as though he's a particularly bad person, although he does have some really questionable moments, but it's more that he's kind of starting so far back in this story of, I guess it's somewhat of a redemption, that I don't know how satisfying it was from a viewer just watching him battle through it and just be a bit of an arsehole the whole time. So he really is quite socially inept. He has issues putting people ahead of himself. And because we get these flashback scenes, we know that this has basically been part of his personality since before he met Jyotsna. Like, I never actually got much of an indication that he was interested in her. Maybe it's much more subtle in his socially awkward demeanor, but this kind of prohibited me from having much sympathy towards him in any way.
Yes, I agree with everything that you've said, because I thought this was an absolutely woeful character. And we've seen this time and time again. You've got this idea, he's taking on this male role of the household, and he's got to marry off his sister, which is all understandable in the cultural context of this film. And I didn't actually understand, like, there's this idea that he wanted this music career, and, he wanted to go to Mumbai to do this, but he had to come home and has all these responsibilities because of this. And I get that, but I didn't believe that he actually wanted this career himself, even though that was why he was pushing Jyotsna so much. And I think as a character, they do a good job of ensuring he avoids any conversations or talk about, he always shuts down conversations when people are asking him, why have you come back? Or, why aren't you putting in any effort to talk to Jyotsna and things like that. But the down and out attributes of this character and these constant shots of him reflecting by water and things like that were just ridiculous. And it meant that I just never really connected with him one little bit. And I think that the scenes with his mother aren't too bad, because they sort of show that, she's trying to convince him he needs to settle down. He needs to snap out of these issues that he's got. But he doesn't change, like you mentioned, throughout the film. From these flashbacks that we do see, we see him smoking on a cliff to smoking on a cliff at the end, from the opening shot to the finishing shot. And they make a deal about that's something that he needs to stop. And that the opening and closing shot are the same thing. So to me, that as a film element tells us nothing has changed. So what is the point of this film? He focuses so much on perfection, and he is anything but a piece of perfection. And that's my thoughts on him.
Well, I guess that's two things to that. One, that's a good point about perfection, but I guess that's almost an argument about why striving perfection doesn't work. And that's kind of the advice his mum gives him, is that you're not going to be perfect, but he's so hell-bent on being perfect, and he's kind of not going to do anything until it is perfect, which is flawed. And I guess it's trying to say that. The other thing is, he lights a cigarette at the start, but he doesn't actually smoke it, because he made their promise. And by the end of it, he's like moving on from her. So he does smoke it, even though he doesn't want it. So it's a symbolism of him having moved on from the shackles of Jyotsna. But everything else is perfectly accurate.
Yeah, I don't know. I just, okay, good. Let's talk about someone else. Who have you got?
Yeah, well, let's talk about Jyotsna. I don't know, Jyotsna. There's such a sadness to this character, because it's a character that we meet as she's really bubbly, she's really cheeky. There's a charisma in a charming and warm way. And I get that she falls in love with Benny, but it pains me that she's never able to move on from him, because she's just got herself stuck in this prison of loving him but not being able to be with him, and continues to live her life following the path that he laid out for her. So she's choosing to remain trapped as opposed to emotionally moving on and moving. And I just don't buy Benny as the man that can do that to you. Yeah, that's the only thing that bothered me. But there's such a sadness to her, and I think that's really deliberate, and probably a commentary on the women's role in that society. And not knowing at the time, but in 1985, obviously, maybe things are a little bit different now. But that's a commentary on that, and that sadness really came through in her character by the end of it.
Yeah, further to what, like, I didn't really understand that love that she had for him. So it was hard to, like, and as you mentioned, it's a sad character because everything that she was doing was for him, and he was still a prick to her. Like, she didn't want to sing, she didn't want to create, she wanted to stay in the mountains. But he forced her into all these things because he didn't have these things himself, is what they're trying to say. And I kind of appreciated her parents in trying to shut down or ensure that she moved on so that she could be separated from him. And sometimes, you know, in a movie about love, you don't necessarily appreciate those things, but I think I did with her because, you know, it was nice to see her actually achieve something, even though it's not an achievement that she wanted. So it's a tricky situation. It's a real tricky situation with her. All right. I think Gita's probably the other character that we probably want to discuss.
Yeah, probably the only other one that I found worth really drawing on. There's also a sadness to this character, but I think it's wrapped in strength and independence. And I guess this is again a reality or even a commentary for females, you know, in this world. They're so dependent on the men in their lives. But what I like about Gita is, whilst she accepts that this is the notion that everyone lives by, she doesn't feel it necessarily to live by that herself. And I initially felt really hard done by her story because, you know, she's eventually left alone and her father dies and her husband's, you know, seeing someone else, and Benny kind of flirts with the idea of being with her and then just buggers off again. But the more I think about it, the more I kind of like her finishing this movie on her own. The idea that she's carving out her own journey and she's strong enough to buck this trend, because I just thought she was just a really beautiful soul.
Yeah, I agree. I think I was very happy that they didn't end up together at the end because she was too nice. She was too good for Benny, and he didn't. From what we saw from him, he did not deserve her one little bit. And you know, the idea that her husband's run off on her and she's still looking like she's trying to be strong, I really liked that in her. But again, I didn't like that she was almost used as a stepping stone for Benny to get what he wanted. Like, it was like she was a character piece that was just used so his story could progress. And I found that a little bit icky. You mentioned that her dad died. Was it her dad or the husband's dad?
Yeah, that's a good point. I at one point I thought it was her dad, and then I thought it was her husband's dad, and then by the end I thought it was her dad again. So I got a little bit lost in that.
Me too. Yeah, me too. That's what, when you said it, I brought it up too, because I was like, yeah, at some stage, and then when they had the burial ceremony, I was like, the husband wasn't there, and then she was doing the last rites sort of thing. So they made it out maybe it was her father, but yeah, I met his father. So yeah, I don't know. It wasn't very clear either, I think. Director Sarthak Dasgupta. Only done 2 features, this one and one called The Great Indian Butterfly in 2007. So a bit of a break between films. Not much else really.
Yeah, I get the vibe that he's not necessarily like a full-time director. I even looking at his IMDb page, there's not a heap of stuff that he's done though. So I think kind of, and reading that, what we read about how he wanted to get this movie made was almost like he just wanted to do it, even though he wasn't necessarily trained in making movies.
Yeah.
So I get the feeling he might do other things as well, which would explain why over like a 20-year period he's made 2 films. He's probably doing a bit more.
Passion project.
Yeah, that's it.
All right, time to talk about some scenes. What are some scenes that you enjoyed in this one?
Yeah, look, again, not necessarily a scene, but I appreciated seeing this more open countryside mountains of India. And I thought some of the scenic shots looked great, particularly in 4K as well. And the cinematography really was beautiful. Those big trees, and I felt quite a warmth watching it and the comfort watching it. I thought they were sensational. And the only scene per se that I have is when he has that argument with her mum, and we've already mentioned this as well, talking about perfection. When sometimes it's better to get the job done than to do things perfectly. And we get a good insight into his character when he's just like, no, everything has to be done perfectly. And you're like, whoa, that's not good, mate. And then I was starting to get worried that I'm going to leave it there, but I do like that she retorts with, life is never perfect. And that's kind of his problem. He's trying to force this perfect life, and it's just not possible. And as a result, you get this super flawed dude.
Yep. I'll just echo your comments. The scenery was one of those things that stood out for me too. Just some absolutely beautiful shots. And the only other thing that I liked in this one was there's scenes where this van with a loudspeaker on the roof goes around promoting this concert, and it just gave me memories of being in like Thailand and Mexico, and that made me happy.
That's good. No, that's what movies are supposed to do. They're supposed to touch you in personal ways.
Okay, well, what are some things you didn't like in this?
So this movie is called The Music Teacher, and we've got this character who has dedicated his life to music. He's hell-bent on sticking to this music path. And there's a scene where Jyotsiana asks Benny, what is music to you? And I'm kind of like, oh, this is going to be important. This is an important scene. And his response was, anything that touches the heart is music. And that was it. And that was terrible. If you're going to make a movie about this, you need to get that line right. And maybe that's going to help with developing that character, but that stunk. So I had to call that one out.
Good.
I hated the scene where this is a flashback scene as well. Maybe I didn't like young Benny, but when she asked him to marry him, and just like absolutely no sense of occasion, he just basically asked her to get the music producer to listen to his songs. Like, how socially inept is this guy? Just not even a recognition of, maybe we shouldn't do this. Maybe your career is better. He was just like, no, go do this. We're not getting. He didn't even and she's like, you didn't even answer the question, and he didn't. He didn't even say yes or no once. Like, that was terrible. What a shocking scene.
Good.
And the only other scene that I do have is when he's at dinner with his mate the second time, and his mate just explodes and just like whacks him.
Yeah.
And I kind of I know there's more to it because I guess he kind of disrespected him, but I'm watching this like, is he just angry at him because he's got no money? Like, he's talked about wanting the job, and he's like, you can't even pay for dinner, rah. That was bad as well. I don't know what that was trying to achieve.
Yeah, maybe because he was offering his sister as well hand in marriage, possibly.
Well, he didn't actually say that.
Yeah.
Then he just said, you just want me to do that.
Yeah.
So that's why I don't know whether there was just like a level of disrespect to it. But yeah, I'm assuming that was his agenda. He just exploded.
Maybe it was just so we could get a shot of him sitting in the gutter. They just wanted another shot of him reflecting and sitting there being sad. It's like, how many of these shots can we get in the film? Oh, God.
That was me though.
Good. So yeah, like you mentioned, this film's about a music teacher, and I know with a lot of the Indian films we do get a lot of song. The songs in this didn't really do much for me, especially the one about rain. There were words used like moist and soaked and pitter patter and pause and swell and passion, and I was like, this is almost like a porn parody song. It was just I was just like, this is too much for what's going on, and I don't know if that's in the translation, but it just
I was going to say, you got to be aware of that.
Didn't hit the mark. This really annoyed me when I was watching the film. I worked it out as the film went on, but I had to pause the film a couple of times and rewind to rewatch a couple of scenes, because at the 19-minute mark and the 27-minute mark, there were these loud coughs. Yeah, right. So go back and do it right. So 19-minute and 27-minute mark, there were these loud coughs, and I rewound and I was like, this is such poor production. Why are these? Like there's someone sitting behind the camera just coughing, and they're filming this thing. As the film went on, like, I thought they were random and really out of context, and then I made sure I heard it right. And then as the film went on, I realized that it's possibly the old guy. Because the scenes were both in the house of Geeta's house. but just like there was no subtitle. There's no subtitle saying "old man coughing" or anything like that. It was just like it just felt so weird and out of place. Just a real
Okay, I do remember them now. That was to me just saying this man's gonna die. I do remember that.
And then it sort of gave me this realization, I guess, that because they do say that he's got tuberculosis, and maybe having him coughing there means that as an audience, we're supposed to understand that he's hearing these conversations that Benny and Gita are having. So he knew that Amit was never going to come back, so he was happy to die. So that took a lot of thinking, and like a film you don't need to think that much and trying to work something out that much. So that really got me. There's a scene where Benny and Gita sort of start to get together and make out, and there's this weird holding and kissing, and I was just like, that was weird. That was real weird, real weird. And the last thing I've got is that whole meeting of Benny and Jyotsna backstage. I just thought it was really awkward with him like crying and begging to have her back, and it just I don't know, it just felt awkward. I couldn't deal with that.
Did you this is it, because you obviously didn't like that scene, you didn't like the ending. Did you want them to get together? Did that bother you?
No, I probably didn't want them to get together, but I wanted like her to like tell him goodbye, not just like such an open-ended thing, like saying, I just felt the conversation between the two. If the film had have ended there, you probably as an audience member would have thought that they were going to get together.
It's a really good point, because I probably similarly, I just got to a point where I assumed, this is all set up so they can get back together. And I still I don't quite understand why they didn't. I don't think she gave me a good enough reason. Because you're right, when he left, I'm like, they'll catch up tomorrow and they'll work through this. And obviously that wasn't about that. You're right, they could have done that a lot better. And if his whole thing is he wanted to make a story about the woman saying no, he probably really missed that opportunity.
There could have been a very clear, decisive. I think she mentioned something about like, I've got a VIP thing, but I'll see you after that or something. I was like, okay, so they're going to see each other.
Yeah. And then I think the only explanation I can really give is that she is just as broken as he is, but there has to be something cultural about the way she's living her life that he can't be part of that. Because his whole thing was like, when he's talking to that mate of his, he's like, oh look, I'll just go on tour with her, or I'll just do this and do that. It's like, oh, you can't do that. And it's like you can't do that, as opposed to like, oh, that would be shameful. So maybe there's got to be something there that they're probably missing a little bit in translation about why it can't work between them. And then you just got these two people who kind of love each other and can't be together. It's really sad.
Yeah, because he does offer to be a manager or something like,
So
he's
like, I'll go live with you in Mumbai, and it's like, why? And she's just like, oh, no, we can't do that. It's like, why not?
But even setting aside any cultural misunderstandings we've got, like you need a clear, definitive moment where if her life is that far up the creek, he needs to be held accountable for he's the reason that that's happened, and that didn't happen.
Yeah, no, I think they got it wrong, but I'm just trying to make sense of it.
Excellent, yeah. All right, well, what was this film trying to say? I think there's a whole bunch of mishmash ideas that we can take out of this one.
Yeah, I do like the idea of trying to sell this notion of moving on and letting go, but this movie, more than any other movie I've probably ever seen that touches on these points, really labors how difficult that could be, and then by the end of it, labors how it's never going to end the way you think it is. And that doesn't mean that you still can't move on. And I think we do see that scene where he does eventually let go when he does take that puff of the cigarette at the end. And it's kind of, for me, I kind of felt that a little bit like, oh, well, that's a nice touch that he's recognized that, and he's broken from this promise that he made to her about quitting smoking. And it's literally an hour and a half of a guy battling to move on. As you said, he doesn't want to talk about her. This part of his life doesn't exist. And he's a much lesser man for it. So you like to think that he's leaving this film in a much better place mentally and emotionally to actually do some things with his life and with the people in his life. So I think there's a mention of him having students in
Yeah.
He's got two students, and I think I read somewhere that one of them overlapped with the place that Geeta's auntie was, or whatever, where she has like one living relative in some city, and I think he had a student in that city. I wonder if there's like a little bit of a, hey, I'm going to be meeting up with her again. So I don't know. It leaves you with some sort of hope that he's going to turn his life around a little bit, because he sure as hell needs to.
Good, very good pick up there on the possibility of him and Geeta being back together. Yeah, I mean, that idea of moving on that you've mentioned, because this guy is like he's facing regret, resentment, anger, pain. He's got to give up on these dreams that he's had, obviously. And I've just related back to what that mum pretty much said, was like, life's not perfect. You just got to get shit done. And that's what he needs to do. He needs to move on, because this idea of love of 8 years and not letting go, it hasn't worked for him. So it is time to move on. And it's a movie called Music Teacher, so it could have been done a lot better. But you'd like to think that this idea of, and there's that one line that you mentioned that was pretty woeful about, you just got to have heart. But they did talk about, you can't study music like you can study math. You've got to have this passion and this idea. And I saw this online. Someone wrote this line saying that, and because obviously it's set in and around these mountains, that mountains are about echoes of songs traveling far and wide into the night, and loneliness amplified with the eerie kind of silence that is mystified by the mist that hangs over the roofs. I was like, "Ooh, that's pretty heavy." The director did say that he thought his idea of this film was about waiting. So his whole idea of this film was about waiting, and for me, the way that was done was through water. And I was so frustrated by the end of that. This idea of rain, rivers, thunder, umbrellas, tears. This whole idea of just how down and out this guy is. I think they made that very clear.
Yeah, it's very true.
Yeah. All right. Well, what did you take away from this one?
I think it's worth mentioning that they did a very good job of aging Benny in his before and after scenes. He looked like a crankly old man in the later ones, and he looked all right in the younger ones. So they did a good job, and they've shown that those 8 years have been pretty hard on him. And I think I'll give him a tick for that. I know the glasses obviously helped. He didn't have glasses, then he had glasses, but he just looked a hell of a lot older. But look, I think this story itself actually has legs. I think as a romance film about moving on and letting go, and how hard that can actually be, how it can almost be impossible, and how it impacts your life and those around you. I think there's a movie in that. But they needed to do a better job around the two main characters and their relationship, and give me a reason to truly connect with them and their plight, and give me a real reason to care. I think if you get that right, that last scene of them actually reconciling and not being able to be together, that's like a waterworks scene where you'll be crying your eyes out if you get that right. And certainly wasn't what I felt. But there's enough there. Like, this notion is there. I can understand why he wanted to make this movie about this idea. I just think just didn't get it that right.
I was trying not to laugh there, because for me, I'm like the almost opposite. The non-linear editing of this movie frustrated the living daylights out of me. My note here was like, thank God for the glasses, because without those glasses, I was struggling to pick up what was present, what was in the past. So that really frustrated me. I don't know whether that really made a difficult part of the experience of the difficultness of this for me, was that the backwards and forwards.
You didn't know it was that, yeah.
And the other thing, like, this is another international film where you've got this idea of men that are ruling the roost, and the idea of arranged marriages. And I know that this is set in 1985, but when we look at films, they're meant to reflect the ideas and the values of the time that the film is made. So it's concerning for me that, and I don't know whether it's, and I think when the stage where you missed a few podcasts, I think I did like 4 or 5 Indian films, and there are a couple that tried to break this stereotype, which were excellent. And then I just feel like going back to this one, sort of reversing what's going on. So there's one called Sony that I looked at, and that did such a better job than what this did. And that just really annoyed me.
I think for what it's worth, he is trying to criticize the gender roles that are happening, and how the women are the collateral damage of the men's decisions. But I don't think there's a clean idea or resolution as to why that's good or bad.
Yeah, I just like with the sister, I would have liked a little bit of pushback from her, or a little bit of like, I'm not happy with this. Whereas she was just like, cool, you've got me a husband, fantastic. And I don't know, I just did, I don't know, I just would have, even one line from her saying, why does life have to be like this? Could have just softened it a little bit. Yeah, anyway.
Yeah, that's true.
IMDb, did you jump on to check anyone out?
No, I didn't.
Me either. So did you have any questions that you wanted to ask about this one?
Yeah, we've sort of been asking each other questions already about why things happened and why they didn't. But so I want to understand, why does Josiana dedicate her success to Benny in that newspaper article? Because to me, that read as, I still love you and I want to reconcile with you. And after he pours her heart out to her and she admits that they can't be together, that article then makes a lot less sense to me as to why she's actually doing that. Is it almost like spiteful that this is the man who's responsible for my success? By the way, I'm super unhappy. Thanks, dickhead. Because she certainly doesn't feel spiteful. So that makes me wonder, why did she like credit him so much, even though she can't? I don't know. I just didn't know why she did that.
And this is where that timeline confused me a bit. I think he didn't have the glasses on in that scene. So that credit was right at the start when she just got her break. And then, so it's 8 years later. Is that me misinterpreting that?
I don't think so. I'm pretty sure it was when she came to town. She's a big star. And that's why, because the sister was there. The sister was the one that had the article. And she's like, hey, look, yeah. And she's obviously not in the younger scenes because she'd be too young.
Yeah, good point. In my mind, just without seeing the film, my recollection of that was a flashback, and that's where I got confused in between what was going on, because the first few scenes I thought he was actually going to, he's a music teacher back in town and he's going to meet a new student. I didn't pick up straight away.
I did think that initially.
Good, very good question. Anything else you want to ask?
No, that was kind of it. I mean, there's plenty we can try and unpack. But
I had. We've already discussed this. I was like, "What was with that ending?" So we've done that. The only other thing is more a statement, like that opening scene where Benny lights up the cigarette and he just throws it off the cliff. I freaked out. I was like, "Bushfire, bushfire!" I don't know if you felt the same way.
No, that was a genuine concern. I wasn't too sure what he was doing. The more I think about it, the more I did like that opening and closing. I know you didn't like it because it didn't symbolize any movement, but I think it was quite nice, and I think it was almost a little bit too in your face, but I think I liked it.
I think probably just because throughout the film we see him crush that pack of cigarettes, and then after she performs, he goes out and smokes, and I was like, it just didn't all fit in, and that's probably me not fully appreciating this non-linear structure.
Yeah, fair.
All right, time to wrap it up. Give the film a rating out of 5 and come up with an average. What have you got for this one?
Look, I enjoyed being placed in this really beautiful setting. I think it made for a really nice winter watch. Obviously, it is the middle of winter here in Melbourne. I think the story itself it lacks some punch, despite the pieces being in place to make it work. Having a main character I liked would have helped, because just creating a better connection with him and his relationships really could have elevated this movie. I am going to give it 2 stars.
Nice. Yeah, I think it's probably easy to see where I'm going with this, but there are a lot better international films that we've covered on Netflix that you can probably check out than this one. Like the performances really stick, where like for the characters that they were playing, they were fine. Like there was nothing wrong with the actual performances. So I just think that the main issue for me with this one is that you just can't have such a down and out character with such little, like you want to see some sort of progression throughout the film. And I didn't see that. And I think that it's really hard to expect audiences to connect with a film if they can't connect with the character. So this is getting a 1.5 out of 5 for me, which gives us a 1.75. So on the lower end, a lot lower than the 800 people on Letterboxd and IMDb.
That's true. We might actually shift that Letterboxd overall rating when we put our scores.
Our scores, and we might. We'll have to keep an eye on that. We have social media. We've got Twitter. We've got Facebook, Instagram. Question for this week was: have you ever had a good music teacher in your life, in your education? I have memories of primary school. We had a cool teacher that used to do like a reward chart where if the class did really well, you'd get she'd bring in like homemade chocolate coated popcorn. And I was just like, that's a memory in my mind. Yeah. And then weird stories. So that was in like primary school. And then when I got to high school, I was actually in the same class as her son. So that was weird.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Were you in a music class with him?
No. He was definitely. I didn't follow through with me here. I've got no music talent at all. So unfortunately, I think I've told this story about me in Grease the musical before. If you want to hear that, go listen to that somewhere else. Oh God. All right. Well, that's about it. I think we're done. We're done for the day.
I think we're done.
We are back for another episode next week. Our 150th spectacular 150 films we're in. This is great, and it's a rom-com. So we've kept this perfectly for you, MJ. That we're gonna have a rom-com film for our 150th. It's from 2019. It's called Someone Great, and it's directed by Jennifer Caton Robinson, and it stars Gina Rodriguez, Brittany Snow, DeWanda Wise, and Lakeith Stanfield, and Peter Vack. Bit of Lakeith. We've seen him quite a bit.
He has been in quite a few Netflix original movies, and we know right now he's quite a big star. But I did look ahead to make sure that the 100, and I know we say we have done more than 150 movies because we have gone out of order with a few bonus episodes here and there. But yeah, this is the 150th Netflix original movie. We've done bloody well.
From memory, when we did our 100th episode, that was like a 1 week that we weren't in lockdown. So we actually did that one together. And I think since then it's all been online.
I do recall that. So no, but we were in lockdown prior to that as well. And there was this little opening where we could get together and do the 100th. And then the week after that, we're gone again. And we haven't actually recorded one in person since.
It's crazy. That's crazy. Oh man.
We are currently in lockdown again right now. So
crazy. But thank you for the chat. I'm glad that I got to speak about that film because I was just sitting on that for a while.
I'm glad I got to listen to you speak about that film. So that worked out well.
Good. I will see you next week.
Sounds good. See you then, mate.